The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host and producer, Kristina Lou, along with my co-host today, Otto Los. Otto is a longtime volunteer, supporter, friend, PI ambassador, my right-hand man every Friday morning, right, Otto? And this morning we are talking to Nancy Musumeci, who is the outreach coordinator at Helen Keller Services for the Blind, and Liz Sergi, who is the director of social work. We're going to talk all about Helen Keller Services for the Blind, their new initiative in Nassau County. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
You do not have to be afraid of us. We're just going to have a conversation. If anyone's watching the video, they look like, oh boy, what did I get myself into? You do not. We just, it's a conversation. We're just here to laugh, right, Otto, and ask some good questions. Hopefully. And educate our listeners. So let's just dive into the basics. What is Helen Keller Services for the Blind?
Well, we are an organization that tries to keep people with vision impairments of all degrees, once they have been deemed legally blind, independent, as independently as possible in their home. So we offer an array of services. Once you have been deemed legally blind from your eye doctor, we will have one of our instructors come into your home and do an initial intake, see how you live, and how can we support you to stay as independently as possible in your home. We have vision rehab therapists. They come in, are you having difficulties in your kitchen, in your living room, in your dining room, by giving you adaptive equipment and devices and helping you how to learn, such as teaching you skills in your kitchen, by giving you tools to use your microwave, your stove. If you're not able to use your stove, lets you, give you other adaptive equipment, liquid indicators, how to use maybe an air fryer because the stove might not be as safe anymore for you. So our instructors would teach you and give you these adaptive equipment. Also, we have,
Orientation and mobility?
Yes, orientation and mobility instructor. The instructor would teach you how to use your cane to get around and navigate safely, going up and down the stairs, crossing the street, and navigating. We have our low vision doctor. That's the time you would have to leave your home to come see our low vision doctor, one of our locations. On Long Island, we have one in Suffolk and Nassau County to your convenience. Our low vision doctor is a specialist when the optometrist at this point cannot give you glasses, they don't work. You come see our low vision doctor, you would get prescription grade magnifiers or wraparound sunglasses. Sometimes the sun also affects people's vision.
Just for classification, the program that Nancy is speaking about is called the ALP program, Adaptive Living Program. So all of the services that Nancy just spoke about are for that program, 55 and older, for individuals who are not currently working.
Now,
So
this
those
all starts, I'm sorry, but on the
Yes.
basis that you're legally blind.
Yes,
What does that actually mean? Like I have friends, we play dominoes,
yes.
and they can't read the numbers on the dominoes. We have to read it out loud. How do you, how do you get classified as legally blind?
So if you have a low vision, if you have an eye doctor and you go to the eye doctor, that's who declares you legally blind. It has to do with your visual acuity.
So it's up to the doctor to
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
judge that
That
you
your field,
fall into that
the
category.
classification of legal
And then you
blindness.
get
Yes,
some
Otto,
kind
you
of-
can't be telling all your
Yes.
friends they're legally
Yes.
blind.
Well, I have,
I will tell
unfortunately,
you though that, they could, if they were ever deemed legally blind, we can still play dominoes and bingo and all those things because there are equipment,
well,
games.
we're going to talk about that as we go
Okay,
along.
all right.
Yes.
But as far as getting back to that, if you are deemed legally blind by your eye doctor, then usually what they'll tell you is about the agencies that are available.
Right.
They'll say, Helen Keller is an agency that services individuals who are legally blind.
So basically, you don't just walk into Helen Keller, you get a referral from an eye doctor typically.
Well, technically they call and they get transferred to Nancy, and then Nancy, go ahead, you do
It
your.
could be one of
Yeah,
both.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not sure if you're deemed legally blind. You've heard it from a friend, a neighbor. What I would do is I would contact your eye doctor for you. It's a form that usually gets filled out. It's called a report of legal blindness. because it could be your visual field, your depth perception, your acuity, like Liz said. So depending upon legal blindness, you can't be legally blind in one eye, it has to be both eyes.
Oh, okay.
So legal blindness is usually 2200
Mhm.
or other factors. So that's why we never say we don't know. One criteria is usually when the doctor does tell you you're not allowed to drive anymore.
Mhm.
Kind of an indication you're
Mhm.
legally blind. But like I said, if doctor didn't say it, but you've heard it from word of mouth, you're interested in services at Helen Keller, I would help you find that out from your eye doctor. It's a form the doctor fills out, like I said, or the doctor could write on a doctor letterhead that the patient so-and-so date of birth is deemed legally blind. That's
Okay.
also acceptable, but we could work together, or sometimes the doctor himself will refer patients to us. We will contact the patient and start the intake process through that.
So it's easy as them making a call, and then we
Do
take
all
the
the
ball
work.
from there.
Well, I think like in the age bracket that is more our audience, typically you were born with sight and then something comes along like macular degeneration or
Right.
glaucoma or whatever else can cause problems. And then there you are. And I know unfortunately several friends that are in that category. And it's very difficult. You know, they all of a sudden they can't drive. But I don't know if they would be declared legally blind. You know, they still walk and talk and, you know,
Yeah, so sometimes you are declared legally blind, and to the natural eye,
You wouldn't know.
you wouldn't know. I mean, there's people that you encounter in your everyday life that
Mhm.
are legally blind, and you would have no idea. Some of them don't use a cane.
Right.
The perception is, big glasses or no vision at all. That's really not the case. Sometimes you have you would have no idea if you weren't, familiar, with the population or the things to look for.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, people who are young who either start out blind
Mhm.
right off the bat or something comes along.
Progressive eye diseases,
Yeah,
yes.
and you know that they are
Right.
blind, uh, you know, for better or for worse, obviously. But I think there's probably a bigger adjustment for people who are older that all of a sudden can't see.
Well, the social work, I mean, I just want to say, so adjustment happens at every age. So yes, I hear what you're saying, but there are, different age groups that go through adjustment pretty significant as well, because you can have a progressive eye disorder and, go about your everyday life, obtain a driver's license, go to college, and all of a sudden, unfortunately, you could hit 25, wake up, and all of a sudden you can no longer see. And so that loss of independence and no longer being able to drive is huge. And then your independence is taken away. You have to rely on someone else. And so that word adjustment, I have to say, whatever age group we're talking about, it's a pretty big,
Your point is
big
very
thing.
Yeah.
good because you're
Because you don't, right?
you're,
It's so many different ways it affects,
yeah.
Yes.
affects people. So essentially, if someone is deemed legally blind, is that really the only, like clarifier, like to use your services? I know you have different programs for age and stuff, but
Yeah, we do have different programs, but unfortunately, yes, you have to be legally blind in both eyes to obtain services from Helen Keller Services for the Blind, with the exception of low vision. That's another program, Nancy could speak
We
about.
do have a
Yeah.
VIP program.
Mhm.
So for people that have not been deemed legally blind, but are interested in coming to see our low vision doctor, it is for a fee. Let me clarify something. If you have been deemed legally blind from your eye doctor, our services are free, regardless of income or insurance.
okay, that's perfect, because that was
Yeah.
another thing that I
Yes.
wanted to.
Yes.
Okay.
So once you've been deemed legally blind, there's no other criteria to fit in the sense receiving services from us. We're nonprofit. We work with New York State Commission of the Blind. We register you with the state. You get a blind registry number. The only information we will ask of you, people are sometimes hesitant, but we cannot do it without, is you need a social security number. Other than that, we won't ask for any other information in the sense insurance. It is free. But if you have not been deemed legally blind but would love to come see our low vision doctor,
To obtain adaptive equipment.
Adaptive equipment, it is
Mhm.
for a fee. We don't take insurance regardless. You still have to just pay the flat fee, but you will be entitled to a visit with the doctor, a magnifier, and I believe a wraparound sunglasses.
Mm.
And then if you are interested in other things that she could also provide, she will suggest and show you, and that would also be to purchase.
Mm.
So the scenario could be then, either I have already got myself declared legally blind with an eye doctor, or can I go to Helen Keller and see a doctor to get legally declared blind? Is that an option, or do you have to have that before you go to Helen Keller?
It's a good question. So so the services that Nancy spoke about earlier, when we were talking about the adaptive living program, the vision rehab therapy, the orientation and mobility, that you legally blind really before you
Mhm.
come see us, because we get the eye report, we do an intake, that happens. To get the services low vision, that she just spoke about, to get adaptive equipment, you don't need to be legally blind. You could just make a call and say, I heard about your VIP low vision program. Can I come in and see the low vision specialist?
So frankly, then in either case, if you can kind of explore your situation by contacting Helen Keller and talking to, like, who would you talk to when you first
You
go
would be
there?
basically speaking to me,
Right,
and we would determine first, when was the last time you seen an eye doctor? We would determine if you are first legally blind. So that would be the first case. We're not going to make you come see our low vision doctor
Right.
if we don't know if you're legally blind or not.
right.
So then we would give you a choice. Okay, you're not deemed legally blind. Some people are like, oh no, but I'm legally blind in one eye.
Mm.
Unfortunately, to be registered with New York State Commission of the Blind and get services from Helen Keller, you need to be deemed legally blind in both eyes. If that is not a criteria you fit, then we would give you the option. Are you interested in coming to see our low vision doctor? It's the VIP program, and it is for, like we said before, for a fee. But first, we would see the first option to see if you are deemed legally blind. Our doctor will not deem you legally blind, because first we would see the first
Right.
option.
Right.
So you're declared legally blind and you come to Helen Keller.
Mhm.
What might be the next step? I mean, does somebody go to a home to see what's going on?
Right, because I was like wondering, like, is there some kind of because you guys said there's clearly so many services. So is
There
there like
are.
an assessment process?
Right.
The social work gets in, like, how does that?
So Nancy mentioned the New York State Commission for the Blind. So there are different ways that you can come into the agency, and it depends on what your goal is. So Nancy spoke in depth about the OUT program, 55 and older, and not working. But obviously, blindness affects everybody. So this happens to younger people. And the main goal of the New York State Commission for the Blind is to put individuals back into the workforce. So if you are declared legally blind from birth, or you have a progressive eye disorder, or something traumatic happens, and this happens to you, and you hear about Helen Keller Services for the Blind, you contact us. Nancy is our outreach coordinator for all of Suffolk, Nassau, and the 5 boroughs. And then you would talk a little bit to her about what you're experiencing and, what your goals are. If your goal is to go back to work, she does do, your intake. You could talk more about that.
Mhm.
And then that intake gets sent to the New York State Commission for the Blind, and then you get a commission counselor. And we could talk more about that, but that,
Yeah.
that's, they want to put people back into the work. And so there's a whole array of services under that,
Umbrella.
under that umbrella, as
And
well as for children too. So,
And sorry to interrupt.
No,
Actually, there's also individuals that are 55 and over and are still working or want to go back to work.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So
Of
they
course,
don't have to
nowadays.
go
Yeah.
under the OUT program.
right.
We could put them under the vocational. So
It's-
that means an individual, regardless of age,
Right.
that is deemed legally blind, but is interested in either maintaining their job or finding employment. We help achieve that.
Yes.
That's
And
A lot of people come
I
in
would
as
think
a,
that would not be an easy task,
No.
frankly. You have like certain organizations that are inclined to hire people.
Yes.
So that's a
So we
big,
do offer job placement services.
right,
There is a whole group of individuals who are specialized in that,
right.
to help the individual, get a job. And there's also, you may have a job, right? And you want to maintain the job. We also offer services so that you could stay in your current employment
So
and
the
do
assessment
all the things.
process kind of leads you down one of the two paths that you
Yeah,
took.
Many
and I always
paths,
think that
many
that's the
paths.
best. I love on this show when we're able to kind of walk people through the process, because I think
Right.
so many of the organizations, people are hesitant because they're like, I don't know, what kind of process is going to be, and I think, the best thing is that they have, you guys and everyone else on the team who can really walk you through step by step, and I know even with Project Independence, just having that kind of crutch, for a lack of a better word, and someone who's going to oversee the paperwork and stuff. And it's
It's
just
scary, right?
No,
It's
I
scary.
mean, I was just sitting here thinking, like picturing having a job and now, you're deemed legally blind, but you don't want to lose your job,
Or you don't want to
it's like,
disclose
right,
to the
it's
employer,
so
right?
scary, right? It's
There's
just,
a lack of awareness in the community about it. And so I have to be honest, we do try to make the process as seamless
Yeah.
as possible. It's a scary thing no matter what age you are, no matter what your goal is. So we really come from the mindset of trying to help the individual as best we can and meet them where they're at, whatever that is for the individual.
Now, I'm sorry, but since somebody's legally blind, they either have to get somebody to bring them to your place, or would you go to their place?
Great question. So it depends on, so yes, like Nancy said, to come to for low vision, the doctor is on site, all of our sites. So yes, you need someone
To bring
to
you?
bring you, or there is paratransit that you can, have access to. But as far as some of the services that we talked about, as far as orientation and mobility and vision rehab therapy, those instructors do come into the home
well, we're going
to
to take
provide
a
services.
quick break there because we are hopping into a break, and we will continue talking with Nancy Musumeci, who is the outreach coordinator at Helen Keller Services for the Blind, and Liz Sergi, who is the director of social work, all about Helen Keller Services for the Blind. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.
WCWP is your home for great music and great conversation. You'll find all that and more on WCWP.org. Listen live on the web, check out the lineup, subscribe to podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest station events. Get in touch with us and let us know if you like what you're hearing. And find out how you can support or get involved at the only community public radio station serving Nassau's North Shore. Plus, sign up to get a free bumper sticker. It's all online at WCWP.org.
Welcome back to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Kristina Liu, along with my co-host, Otto Los. We're going to jump right back in with Nancy Musumeci, who is the outreach coordinator at Helen Keller Services for the Blind, and Liz Sergi, who is the director of social work. And really just the ins and outs of Helen Keller Services for the Blind. I mean, it's such a wonderful and special program. And as I mentioned before the break, just having, you guys on to educate everyone about this, because I've known about Helen Keller Services for a long time, but I had no idea about all these, details and ins and outs. And I just love knowing the nitty gritty
Thank you for having
about
us.
it all.
What, another thing I kind of read about before, preparing, is that you get involved also with people who have the vision issue, but they also might have other disabilities. They have mobility problems, maybe they have cognitive problems. If people have issues like that, can they still go to Helen Keller with the combination of not just one problem, but
Oh,
other problems?
yes, absolutely. Yes, we do service individuals who are legally blind but have other
Disability.
as well.
Right.
Yes.
And then if the individual that you brought up with the hearing loss, depending upon the degree of hearing loss, we refer them to our sister agency, which is Helen Keller National Center, and they deal with individuals with vision and hearing impairment.
Right.
And they're located in Sands Point.
Okay, yes. Yeah, because that's right. And that's
So
what the town,
Stance Point and where you are two different operations.
We're all under one umbrella.
Right.
Sands Point services individuals who are deaf-blind. And then we have 3 locations, Brooklyn, Hempstead, and Islandia. And we service individuals who are legally blind who may have other disabilities as well.
I see, okay.
We have a
But-
school, we also have, I don't, want to get off
Mhm.
track here, but we also have OPWDD, or the people with developmental disabilities. We do have day programs as well.
But the big thing is that as a candidate for using the services of Helen Keller, we could go to somebody like Nancy and get an assessment as to what path we ought to go down. In other words, I don't have to be as the person on the outside saying, oh my, where am I going to go within Helen Keller? They have all these different things.
Correct.
They would call me directly,
Right.
And
We
what's
would
your number? What's the best number, Nancy, for like someone who's listening to reach out to?
516 758 2534.
7582.
534.
Okay, great. Great.
So they would basically call me directly. I would help them get the form they need. So that would be the first step, of course, in starting the process. And then also then determining what are their needs? What are they looking for?
But people call you too with questions like they don't know, like
Correct.
exactly what he just said. Like,
Correct.
I'm not really sure. I heard about your agency. This is what I have, or, my daughter has this, or, my aunt. And you do talk people through that. I mean, you do lead them in the right direction.
Because
know,
sometimes they need to go to the National
Exactly.
Center, or maybe they're not looking particularly for Helen Keller to come in, because we are short-term services. We are not long-term. So our services are short-term to get people adjusted to their vision loss. And they're looking for day hab. So that's another
Through
program.
OPWDD. So
Correct.
yes, the easy answer to your question is you might be out there, you have a lot of questions, you're unsure
Yeah.
what your path is.
And I think that, frankly, is more
Yeah.
common than not,
Yes.
because anyone, I mean, just working with Project Independence and the seniors, a lot of time we'll get these phone calls like, I don't know what I need. I just need help, in the home or whatever it is. And I think that that's such a huge thing and a great takeaway, that you just don't, you just need to make that initial phone call, right? And that you guys could pick up the baton from there, which
Well, typically people who probably listen to this show are 60 and over. However, they also have children and grandchildren. And I have an example. I have a good friend, unfortunately lives in Florida, whose granddaughter is albino and has very severe vision problems because of it. Would somebody like that be a candidate? That they have, it's a topic that a lot of people probably don't get too involved with, but there's a lot of problems when somebody has, they're born an albino.
Oh, yes.
We
they-
do have many
yes.
participants that are enrolled in our program.
Yes.
And they actually start from youth
Yeah.
and continue on because their vision changes, and then they go to school and they want to continue in either schooling and education and career. And we guide them through the whole process, because also incorporated into people that 60 and over, also in your age group, that are working.
Mhm.
So we have not the adaptive living program, excuse me.
the vocational
Technology.
Technology. Oh, great.
So people that are going to school and working
Mhm.
need technology training. So there's so many different areas
That's
that we
amazing.
help them. And someone with albinism,
Yeah.
They
All
will
the
come
time,
to
yes.
the
They
whole-
come as
I-
as
I-
children, yes.
Really wasn't ever personally involved
Yes.
until this scenario, and I realized the difficulty of, kids can be cruel, number
Yes.
one. There's a lot of stigma. And then when you have a vision problem on top of that,
It compounds it.
you're really dealing with some very complicated stuff.
There's a camp that runs out of here every summer called Camp Helen Keller. And it's run July through early August. And a lot of kids, look at that.
Wow, look at
Camp
Otto.
Helen
See,
Keller,
Otto does his
yes.
research. You
Yes,
see that.
so I'm not quite sure your friend's granddaughter, how old,
Well,
but
she lives in Florida.
Oh,
yes,
big
no,
time.
I know
Yeah.
that, but yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of kids come to the camp, they meet, individuals who
That's
may
great,
have
that's
similar
great.
circumstances.
Now, there's a thing I read about also that you might be involved with, I Can Connect.
Oh, technology.
Yeah, and is there like a Helen Keller in Florida?
So that's a complicated question. There's not a Helen Keller in Florida.
Keller-like, let's say.
So Helen, I'm sure that there is, yes, because I know that Florida does have something similar. We talked about the New York State Commission for the Blind. I know every state has a similar state agency that does deal with individuals who are blind.
Right.
And then there have agencies, not named Helen Keller, but I'm sure they have agencies that deal with vision loss,
Right.
legally, blindness.
Yeah, and like, so Liz, when would social work come in? Like, how does that, does Nancy say like, listen, we need to call in like some social work services? How does that kind of process end up going through?
So it's a two-part question. So I know you said the demographic for listening to this radio station is 60 and older. So okay, so if we're talking about the OUT program, 60 and older, not working, we do have this new initiative through Nassau County and the Department of Aging. It is a support group called Sight Through Support. It just started in February.
Sight and support.
Sight Through Support. Okay, it's a new initiative. We just started month 2. It is a weekly socialization group, runs on Wednesdays, 1:30 to 3. And right now we only have one location. It's running out of Hempstead. And it's really just a bunch of individuals who are over 60 years old, not necessarily legally blind. You can be visually impaired for this as well. We come together and I facilitate a group. Like I said, it's in the infancy stages. So right now we're just getting to know one another and doing, a lot of talking about stories and, similar circumstances. However, I have big plans for that.
Facilitate
Yes,
that?
I am the facilitator of that group every Wednesday. Yes.
See, that's an interesting, you used the visually impaired.
Yes.
The people that I'm involved with, 3 of them specifically, actually, it's one of them had to stop playing with the group because they couldn't see anything. And
Yes.
They decided to pack it in. I would classify all of those people as visually impaired because they function, they walk without falling or,
Yes.
but it's not legally blind, but it's definitely impacts your life.
Oh, absolutely. So
Yeah.
we've had individuals at this group since we started that are not legally blind. They are visually impaired. They have had multiple discussions with their current eye doctor. Unfortunately, it seems the route they are going is towards legal blindness, but this group is open to, both visually impaired and people who are considered
Things
blind.
like macular degeneration
Yes.
can progress through the steps, I think.
Yes.
Visually impaired.
Right, you don't start off.
to being
Yes.
legally blind.
Absolutely.
So you kind of just like, frankly, it's like I wear hearing aids, all right? When people lose hearing, they don't lose it like one morning they wake up and say, I can't hear anymore.
It's progressive.
It's very gradual.
Yes.
And I think that in some vision loss cases, it's the same.
Absolutely is. And we talk about that. It's the word that we started when we started the show. It's called adjustment.
Right.
So there is times that you are constantly going through that state of adjustment because progressive eye loss or progressive hearing loss. Yes.
All
So
part
yes,
of-
it is open every Wednesday, 1:30 to 3, for individuals who are both visually impaired and legally blind.
And if somebody wanted to attend something like that, how would they go about it? Who?
So they could contact, since I'm the facilitator of that group, they could contact me directly.
And how would they do that?
Best contact number for me is 347-633-4591.
633.
4591.
And with that, the partnership, I know you guys say, and obviously, Town North Hempstead's in Nassau County. So this partnership with Nassau County, I know you have the support group, but you're able to access other services as well with, with low vision, just low vision for the Nassau County partnership that you guys are doing, or?
So not legally blind,
Yes,
just low
right,
vision?
yeah.
So through us, no. So as far as
Okay.
social, I know that's the question that you asked me. I'm sorry, I got a little off track. No, unfortunately, if you don't meet criteria for legal blindness, social work through me or through the agency, unfortunately not.
But this support group,
But that
though,
support group,
is
yes.
is that the only service that would be
Yes.
was okay?
And I got to be honest, I have to give credit here to my, my colleague, Nancy. This all happened through a contact she made doing outreach events. She talked a little bit about Helen Keller services for the blind and the work that we do. Would you like to talk a little bit about how this group got spearheaded? Through the
Well,
Department of
actually,
the
it was
Aging?
speaking to Debbie from Office of the Aging.
Mhm.
And she was talking about the need that she felt seniors needed, support groups, and
Mhm.
what is there that we could do to help them? They're lonely, they're by themselves,
Isolated.
isolation.
And there's not a lot of money available for those
Yeah,
programs,
yeah.
unfortunately.
No.
Not even through our agency. It's very limited.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
we were very fortunate that this happened. It's very exciting that we're able to roll this new initiative out
Yeah, that's
for both visually impaired and individuals who are legally blind.
no, and I think, just, obviously a lot of these diseases we mentioned are progressive, right? So I was like, think, it's so nice to get involved in an organization when, you're kind of starting out,
Yes.
so this way it's like, because it obviously gets scarier as
Yeah.
it progresses. I mean, I could only imagine. And I think, knowing, getting to know people and know the supports, makes it so we always talk about preparing on this show,
Yes.
and how it takes away so much pressure and, like you're not in the emergency situation, like, God, like now what do I do?
Right.
So I think that I love that you kind of have this group now that you can kind of, everyone could join and talk it out because there is a huge value in support groups.
Oh my, so
certainly.
I got to tell you, that's
Yeah.
my passion. The
Yeah.
shared peer experience, there's nothing like it. I mean, I enjoy facilitating it, but I tell every group that I work with, I always feel like I get more out of the group. I
Yeah.
learn more from the individuals that I get to work with than they get from me. So
Sounds like a
you-
true social worker speaking. Yes.
Well, you get to share, you get to share stuff you
yes,
don't.
yes,
Well,
yes,
That's exactly
you're not
what
alone.
they do.
yes.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
I think people, and I've had, again, friends who think like they're the only ones.
Right. I mean,
who have
it's,
this
it's human
problem.
nature, right?
And
To think
that's
that.
what's coming up a lot, so I do run a lot of groups, through the agency, no matter what avenue you're coming in through. But with this group, we do have individuals right now that are just visually impaired, and it's a scary thing.
Yeah.
And it eases, I want to say, some anxiety and stress hearing from, peers what their experience has been and the supports they have been able to receive.
Yeah.
How about like now, you're one of the older persons, you're not going back to work, but you do want to live in your own home.
Mhm.
What would the program be like to
Like
show me
adaptive
how
technology
to
stuff?
adapt the best way in my own home?
So that goes back to how Nancy started.
When we
Yes,
spoke about
yeah.
the intake taking place in the home,
Right.
that's why they would like to do that because it is an individual situation, case by case, because the need you might have is if maybe you are living with a partner already, maybe you're living with the children or by yourself. So that need is different.
There's all different types of devices and equipment that can make you
As
independent as
Yeah.
possible. On the microwave, no, you can't see the numbers, the numbers are there. There's bump dots.
Right.
And you get that training on how to, continue to try to use
The microwave versus the
safely,
stove.
safely, yes. Or how to even, navigate in your home, safely now with the use of a cane. It used to be, easy. Now, not so much. You might have stairs and upstairs and downstairs. So,
And
that's,
now, for those that, let's say you want to get a new microwave, that has like the bumps, does the individual have to pay for that? How does that work? Like when
The
you guys
bumps
go,
Put on
Bump
your
dots.
oh, so
microwave.
Bump dots,
that's,
They're
yeah.
called bump
Okay,
dots,
bump
and
dots,
it's a touch and feel. So the instructor would come in and program your microwave, your stove, your washing machine.
This is all done
your
at-
remote
And it
control.
is all free. Any
yeah, because
device,
that's what
any device.
I think
so-
Otto and I are
yeah,
struggling to
yeah.
understand. There's like no cost.
Yeah,
Hold
no,
on.
no, so the bump dots that we were talking about, or any devices that were determined during the assessment that would be beneficial to you to help you be independent, are free of cost.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Well, as
really
they know, I'm a senior who promotes people using technology. And there's a tremendous amount of technology that you keep hearing about, especially with AI now coming along, that could be useful to people if, in some cases, they can adapt to using the technology. So I think there's different levels of technology, some for people who really have no technological ability at all, and then people who are capable of using something like Alexa in a more in-depth
Yes.
way. And I think you probably have to evaluate the
That's why the
the
instructor would come
capability
in
of the
and
people, if like,
determine the need.
Yeah,
And
like-
determine what they can do, like you said, or the knowledge or information.
we had a 100-year-old lady on the show, I don't know, about 3 months ago. And one of her biggest things was she had a physical therapist in the house, and she wanted him to show her how to get up if she fell in every room in her house. And that's
It goes back to us, saying about preparing. But we're taking another break.
Right.
After the break, we will continue talking with Nancy Musumeci, who is the outreach coordinator at Helen Keller Services for the Blind, and Liz Sergi, who is the director of social work, all about the wonderful services provided at Helen Keller Services for the Blind. You're listening to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio.
So I get this call from my grandma, and she's like,
"What's a podcast and how much does it cost?"
So I tell her, podcasts are like radio shows, but you can download them on any device and listen to them anywhere at any time, and they're free. And then she says,
"I see, but where can you find good ones?"
And I'm like, go to wcwp.org/podcast and check out the lineup of original shows, or download any podcast app on your phone or tablet and search for LIU Studios. And she's all like,
"Oh, that sounds easy."
And then she asked me what an app is.
LIU Studios podcasts, available on any podcast app. Those little button things on your phone screen. Just ask your grandkids.
Welcome back to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Kristina Liu, along with my co-host, Otto. We're going to jump right back in with Nancy Musumeci and Liz Sergi from Helen Keller Services for the Blind. So let's get back into, prior to the break, we were talking about just adaptive technology. And I really want you guys to clarify, the technology piece is really geared towards people who are, doing more of the vocational, right?
Yes, so we do offer assistive technology services. There is a whole department, and there's software and apps. There's all these different things coming out, meta glasses that are fabulous. And those are all like the equipment and the training really is accessible to individuals who come in through the New York State Commission for the Blind and are looking to go back to work or are currently working and want to save their job. So I just, technology is huge. And there's been so many advances still coming. Just to clarify, we do have a department, but, like I said, you come in through different avenues. So I just thought.
But what about, though, like there are other technologies that people who are in a non-working category, like to help you read, maybe dial a telephone, such as that, is that available? And you mentioned something about a low vision specialist.
Yeah, so we do have so I'll talk a little bit, and then Nancy. So we do, like we mentioned, we have a low vision specialist. She does do an exam, and then, based on your living situation and, what your needs are, she does make recommendations for devices that will make such as the things you mentioned a little bit easier. There is a magnifier. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? Yes, there are things for, that demographic.
So it depends, and that's why I said it goes by an assessment, because we are funded, we're nonprofits, so the money's allocated differently. So if an individual is living with a family member and has help versus an individual that lives by themselves, the individual living by themselves might get a little bit more money allocated to them versus an individual living with family.
Makes sense.
That has support.
Okay, and has support. So some of the adaptive equipment that we do give out that help individuals would be talking watches, big button phones.
Like the liquid, you
The liquid indicator. So in the kitchen, you still want to be a little bit independent. You want to pour yourself your water for your medications or just drink. You put it in your cup. as the water level reaches that level, it will start beeping for you.
Oh, wow.
We have plates with lips. We have talking thermometers. We have pill indicators. We have writing signature guides. We have calendars that are large print calendars, large print books. Our instructors would register them also with the reading book clubs, Meals on Wheels, Accessoride, I believe it is, or
No, it's
Able Ride,
Able
Able
Ride
Ride,
for
yes,
Nassau
yeah.
County.
Mhm.
Able
Suffolk
Ride.
County is SCAT.
So it depends the assessment.
Yeah,
Now, the
because
low
that's-
vision doctor for our ALP program, you will be given a magnify or wraparound sunglass. If you would like to purchase other things to help you, it would be at a fee.
Mhm.
And the doctor would tell you, oh, we have a CCTV screens and different other
Are
Like smart
CCTV
home
screens-
nowadays, there's all kinds of toys, if you will, about putting lights on and off, or
Right, you could have them all
use
set
something
now.
like an Alexa type device to play music or read you.
and there's certain phones with adaptive now accessibility
yeah.
and apps on them.
Right.
With a CCTV, because I remember, many, many years ago, the town of North Hempstead, Project Independence, we had some, that we were given, and they were gigantic. Are they still very large CCTVs? Are they now? Because I'm talking like
Yeah, I know which ones
plus
you're
year-
talking about.
Yeah,
We do get
they're-
them donated to
yeah.
the agency, but now they're much smaller.
Yeah,
They have
okay.
handheld ones.
Oh, great. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
we-
they are
different
big
sizes.
Yeah, that's
sizes.
very,
Yes,
very interesting.
they have progressed,
Yeah.
forward.
So I remember that. We were like, oh, what do we do with this giant thing
Yes,
now?
yep.
No, and I think that that's so great because, we always say, obviously everyone's always so focused on the big things, right? And I think that, when you're dealing with like adapting to your house, even, blind, not blind, and just to eat, like whatever it might be, there's so many little things that can help you maintain your independence, and
Absolutely.
everything, Nancy, that you just went over. I mean, I was like, that's such a great idea, because you're not at a loss, I mean, you're the fact that you're able to, pour yourself water. It's like things we all take for granted, and I think that it's such a positive message for anyone listening or knows someone that might be in this, that there are these little kind of quick fixes. It doesn't always have to be something so major, you could just having this in your home is really special. And I just like that someone can go in and assess, and
Yes,
work
yes.
through it with you based upon your individual need, because that's something I want everyone to realize too. This is an individual journey. It's not a cookie cutter
No,
kind of
it's
situation.
not a one
Correct.
size fits
Yeah.
all approach. But it's interesting because, our individuals get just as excited about the devices that we mentioned
Yeah.
as you, because the support group that runs on Wednesdays, we have somebody that's 95, legally blind, and in group on Wednesday, he was just talking about how when he wakes up in the middle of the night, he wants to know what time it is, and it's very difficult for him.
Yeah.
And when the instructor came to the home and did the assessment, he got a whole bunch of devices. And at that time, he was like, oh, I don't really, I'm not going to use this,
Mhm.
And then, as he's adjusting and time is moving on, he's waking up and he doesn't know what time it is. And then he's like, I remembered I got this alarm clock. And, all I have to do is hit a button and it tells me what time. So when I go to bed, I put it right next to me. And if I wake up in the middle of the night, all I do is hit the button.
Oh.
And it says, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And so, there are these things and, it does make life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So, he was
I think
excited
that's
about
It
it.
gives you some
Yeah.
kind of, normalcy, for lack of a
Yes,
better
yes,
word, and
yes.
it's like that thing. Cause I mean, it's all these things that, we take for granted,
Yes.
and it's just, the fact that you can, like, this is great. Like, I could still know what time it is,
Yeah.
in just a different kind of way, which
Yeah.
is really, really special. I just think that's,
I mean, the world
So
of
wonderful.
technology is growing.
Exponentially,
Yeah,
yes.
and to be able, I think one of the difficulties is that there's so many things out there that you really need somebody who knows what they're
right.
talking
To
about
Yes.
walk you
to
through it.
survey
Right.
your situation and say, here's the tools that would help you, make your life
Life-
better
Yes,
and safer, maybe.
yes.
There's safety involved also.
Yes, I do have to say, I mean, I know I do work for Helen Keller Services for the Blind, but the instructors that work there that are experts in their, disciplines, whether it's vision rehab therapy, orientation and mobility, or low vision specialists, that's what they look to do. They really want to, provide you with things and services that will make your life easier and better. And, you don't feel so vulnerable and so isolated. We do take an approach that really, caters to the individual and their needs, whether they live alone, whether they live with a caretaker, or maybe they have an aide come in. We really try to, make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, I mean, as the more we talk about it, the more I realize that every situation is different.
Everyone.
Depending on the person and the personality and who they have for support, if anybody.
Yeah, and just because you may have glaucoma, it's not the same for everybody. There's all different types and people see all different things, and
Right.
it's really, individualized.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of volunteers involved with Helen Keller?
Great question.
Or do you need volunteers?
So you know what? I've been trying to grow the volunteer program since I started a long time ago. Then unfortunately, I hate to say this, bringing up due to COVID, we went remote. We lost a lot of volunteers. Then people didn't want to come to the agency. Then people didn't want strangers in their home. We have been trying to rebuild that. And we have been having people reach out to us. So we have a couple. Again, that's kind of in the infancy stage, because you think about it, sometimes people don't want a stranger coming into their home. We used to have like a whole mail reading program, where either, if they couldn't come to the agency, someone would come into the home. That's a big thing. Mail still happens. All this mail comes, you can't read it. And then we would have a day where we would have individuals come to one of our sites, and then someone would help read their mail. A lot of that stuff kind of changed a lot, since
Well, I mean,
our world
Project
has changed.
Independence basically faces the same challenge in terms of people allowing a social worker or a nurse in their home. I think
Yeah,
it just
and that's
comes-
why, that's
Because-
where there's the options of the office and the
Yeah,
phone,
yeah.
and it's, you're fortunate.
Well,
more-
like
that we've
life,
been
it's
a-
like it takes
Yeah,
time and
Yeah,
trust.
right.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
think about that. You're feeling vulnerable, right? Then all of a sudden you have, you're losing your vision, whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean,
and then all of
yeah,
a
it's
sudden,
scary.
a stranger coming into your personal space, it's scary for some.
Yeah.
And so,
Uh,
we have to take that,
Mhm.
we obviously take that into consideration. There are some people that just aren't ready to have a stranger come
Well,
into
like
the
I
home.
said,
They want to get to know us.
in all of our lives, all right,
Yes.
trust takes time.
Absolutely.
It doesn't just
Absolutely.
happen in 5 minutes.
No.
And I think with Project Independence, they have a very good continuity
Yeah.
between the social workers and the nurses. And the fact that now Project Independence is known in North Hempstead and has a trust reputation. And Helen Keller probably, although, everybody knows about the movie and, the history of how
Yes.
Helen Keller came about, but a lot of people probably don't know as much about the programs that
You're
are
right.
available that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So it takes time for that to register, if you will.
No, you bring up a good point. Just Helen Keller, yes, the name is known to many. I don't think there's an understanding of the population itself still to this day.
Yeah.
What people experience and, how it affects them and it affects their families. There's
Well, unfortunately, the reality of life is there are so many things that people could have. And unless you know people who have the problem, it's kind of like, and I think that's kind of self-preservation, because if you knew about every possible disability and every disease that exists,
good point. You could get caught up.
you wouldn't be,
Yeah.
you'd be.
Go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be bad.
Yeah, I hear you. Yep.
But you find out all of a sudden, hey, I'm very interested. Like in my case, frankly, talking to you, because I have these friends.
Yeah, and then now you're able to bring this information, and that's what we always say about,
Yes.
doing this program.
And I
that
know
we're
how
able to
frustrated
spread the
they are.
word, it's just,
They're very frustrated because
Yes.
there's things that, like I used to play golf with one of them.
Mhm.
No, that's a long time out of the equation. So there's things you have to give up.
Yep.
And
And it's
then,
not easy.
no, change is the only thing constant, as they say.
Yes.
And some of them are a little more severe than others. Losing vision and becoming visually impaired
Yes,
is pretty severe,
it is.
you know?
But I think it's also important to note, and why getting involved with some of these organizations, that you might not have to give up something fully. It just might be a little different now.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I think
Yeah.
that's what's so important about reaching out to organizations like yourself, because I know a lot of us, it's human nature to be like, you know what, like, or I'm just getting older, I can't do this anymore. I'm not shouting out to my parents, but that might come out of their mouth here and again. But so I think that it's a great and it's a hopeful thing to say, maybe I can still partake in the activities that I enjoy. It just will be a little different.
Yes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that that's just such an important message.
If
and-
people want to just get kind of some preliminary information, website, brochures, or anything that people can look at,
They're more than happy to call me.
right?
I could also, if they're interested in brochures, we could get it. We also have online. We do have a website online.
Right.
It's helenkeller.org.
HelenKeller.org.
Correct.
Okay. That's easy enough.
That's great.
And if they'd like some information or brochures, I'd be more than happy to mail it out to them if they want. And they could also, like I said, call.
Yeah. I know, and I think sometimes that's the best thing, because just sitting down and kind of talking about it, and as we mentioned, it's so individual, so you can kind of break it down
Absolutely.
with you based upon that, and with the vocational, as I said, obviously, our listening base is mostly seniors, but there are, as a lot of caretakers and whatnot, and so with the vocational training, so if someone reached out to you and said, I'm looking for a job, how does that work? You say, okay, what are you interested in? What kind of job? Or, how does that
Yes.
process kind of go?
We would fill out an application. It would go in a different direction. We would be submitting it to New York State Commission of the Blind, where you would be assigned a counselor at that point. And that counselor then would work with our team.
Well, first of all, the counselor, I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
but
go ahead.
the counselor and the individual really talk about where they are, what their goals are, and they work on establishing the goals upon
Okay.
conversation. So the New York State Commission counselor and the participant, they have a lot of dialogue. They do their own intake, and then they determine what goals, okay? Once the goals are established, then the counselor tells them the agencies that are accessible to them, and then they make referrals to the agencies, okay? So if, we are, Nassau, Suffolk, we're in the boroughs, if we're easily accessible, obviously, they get referred to us. And then that's what happens. You come in and you usually get core services first, which is low vision, orientation, mobility, vision rehab therapy, and social work. Then based on that, you can go in other avenues, right? If you have a job and you need the technology right away, there could be a referral for assistive technology right away. As far as the job placement services go, that's a whole nother umbrella, and I don't even want to try to talk to it because there are experts in that field.
Right.
But you
would
said
get a
this,
job
you said this
coach.
early on. It's not as easy as you
Right.
think.
Yeah.
So there are specialists that really focus on you and your skill set and, the knowledge and experience you have. And then they really work with you to try to put you in the right job to help you maintain it.
Yeah.
That's a longer process. But yes, there's all different types of programs within that arena.
So I think the key ingredient that I'm hearing is somebody assessing the situation and applying whatever tools are available to make
To
that
that individual
assessment
situation, right?
better,
Yeah.
for the person,
Yes.
Yes.
which is all you really hope for,
Yes.
in any problem.
Yeah, everybody's journey is different. We are a short-term care agency. Short-term, I put in air quotes because everybody's journey is different. So people there's not like, okay, this is, 1 day, 1 week, 2 months. It's different when you go through training. Everybody has a different style of learning.
Right.
So, the process is different for everybody.
And that's a perfect way to end the show. That was a very, very good time there, Liz. We would like to thank our guest today, Nancy Musumeci, who is the Outreach Coordinator at Helen Keller Services for the Blind, and Liz Sergi, who is the Director of Social Work. all about the wonderful services that go on at Helen Keller Services for the Blind. I'd also like to thank everyone who has joined us. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.